Live stream audio test, 1, 2.
Morning everyone, it's now 10 o'clock, the inquiry is resumed. Welcome back. I've got a few housekeeping points before we start. And I'm testing my memory. I've gone and left my my note of what they are upstairs on my desk. So let's hope my memory serves me. I think the first point was regarding Mr. Jones. Is Mr. Jones with us?
He will be.
Ah. So he's with us on the internet.
He's with us virtually. And
Okay.
There he goes. There he goes. There you are, sir.
I can see you. Okay, well, we'll test if the equipment's working fully in a moment or two, but thank you to everybody who allowed that to happen. That's appreciated. The other points now. Well, one of them goes to timing, really. I'm hopeful that we'll get through the two remaining witnesses today, certainly based on the time estimates that you've kindly provided me with. I don't foresee a problem with that, and also we should have plenty of time also to run through the conditions in section 106 session. So 2 points that flow from that. Firstly, the section 106, I don't have a great deal on that, in all honesty, so we'll depend, we'll see how that session goes. So obviously I don't want to rush it, but the fact that I don't have a great deal on it may shorten things a little. One thing I would like somebody, and I'm probably looking at the appellant side as it's your scheme. I think for the benefit of interested parties, it'd be helpful if somebody just talked us all through the heads in terms of what's going to be what the 106 is intended to secure and why. And not chapter and verse, but just sort of headlines to put it in terms that interested parties will understand, and how that applies to the scheme. As an aside or a related aside, I think the SIL compliance note that the council helpfully produced is really helpful in that regard, actually. But I think it would be helpful if somebody could talk to that. I'm forewarning you rather than springing it on.
I'm just checking. So Mr. Coombs is comfortable to do that. As you say, the why will be found in the SIL statement.
Quite.
The what is in the 106.
Indeed, but if those sort of can be flagged as headlines, I don't want an essay on this. It's really just for the benefit of interested parties, please. And if there are any queries that flow from that, we'll pick them up. On conditions, there's I gave you some headlines last week in terms of a few things that have caught my eye. I don't want to talk about those now, but has there been a conversation about those between then and now, and have they? So is there a new iteration?
Yes, sir. There's a new iteration that was sent last night. I've asked the appellant to review that and just make sure they're comfortable with it. I don't think there'll be any problems with it, and we'll be able to issue a copy to you hopefully later today with the council.
Okay. Is that version agreed between the council and the appellant?
It follows a conversation that took place last night, or yesterday afternoon, so I haven't yet had a chance to go through it in detail, but I assume it follows the nature of that conversation. So. All
right, so there's been some movement, and if you can ensure that Keep Wrington as Wrington are kept in the loop on that would be appreciated, please, so we all know we're all talking about the same thing. I think the other thing was site visit. We've touched on this already, but we don't really have any details in place. I'm still of a mind to sort of do it in 3 chunks, so to speak. The first 2 being accompanied, that's to say, visiting those neighbours who've indicated that they would like me to visit and see from their property, of which there are 4. And is it worth me just flagging who they are? Does the council know? Has somebody got a record of who the 4 are? I'll tell you who they are. I don't want to say where they live, but I will say who they are. Well, first is Mrs. Edgar. As you're here, would you still like us to view it from your property? You would, okay, that's fine. There's also Helena Markovich-Buck, who's indicated she'd like us to view it from her property. Mrs. Whittam, and Mr. Hunt. And it's really sort of coordinating that and getting in touch with these people. I'm looking at the council now for some assistance, really. I mean, whilst I'm putting you on the spot ever so slightly, but the way I foresee tomorrow, assuming we are where I anticipate will be, that's to say, just hearing closings in them, I think that will probably take us to somewhere in the region of 12:30, 1 o'clock. So I would hope that the site visits would start perhaps 2 o'clock, just to give ourselves plenty of elbow room and to get out there and packed up and so on. So I think what I'd like to do is do those 4 first. That's likely to take an hour, and we can convene on site, see what we need to see on site, and then I will go and do the off-site, the remaining off-site things unaccompanied, that's to say, on my own. Which brings me to my next point. Is there an agreed itinerary, a route that I'm to follow, that parties want me to follow? I saw a draft some time ago, but I think that's all it was.
So there's a board sort of agreement. It's a case of where one starts, because it's linear routes, it's not circuitous.
Okay. Well, I mean, I suppose my point is, does that matter? Is that just for me? Okay. Well, as long as I know what you want me to see, and to some extent why, that's all that really matters from my point of view. And keep Wrington, has Wrington been included in that? Because obviously it's important I see what they want me to see as well.
Excuse me, sir, if I may. It's just been pointed out that it's apparently Mr. Andrew Hunt and not Michael Hunt who might have requested that, I'm told. Just so that there's no confusion.
Yeah, okay. Did I say Michael?
No.
Okay.
So he's my next door neighbour, but I've actually got a Hunt either side, so it leads to confusion, and it will be Andrew Hunt, who lives at number 10. That's
my note. So okay. Good. We're on the same page. Good. That's good to hear. Sounds like you're as well placed as the council are, perhaps if you can get your heads together and liaison communication with these parties. But it's good. Okay. Well, if somebody can sort of pull that itinerary together and perhaps give me an update, perhaps at close of play today, regarding contact with those 4 people, and hopefully, if we target, I can't offer any guarantees, of course, but if we target between 2 o'clock and 3 o'clock tomorrow for them, so that they're not hanging around and waiting on us, that would be helpful. And also if we can get any feedback on whether or not they still want us to come and visit. Okay, any other housekeeping points that have not already been covered?
If I may, sir, the relating to, there's 2 matters. I was just making sure actually that you had an email, and I think you have, because you mentioned the 106 documents, but dated the 15th of June, that has the title deeds for the proposed site attached to it, and it had all the timings and details of the appellant's witnesses on that email.
Yeah, I believe so. I will just go back and double check. I've certainly got the title deeds in a folder, but let me just make sure I've got the email. If you just bear with me, so it's a lot of scrolling back to the 15th. Yes, let me see. This originated from Mr. Coombs, did it?
That's correct, sir.
I've got, yeah, I did get it on the 15th, but I think it was sent on the 14th, and the subject is the two appeal references and then appeal sites at Wrington. Is that the one? Sent by
Yes, that's correct.
Sent by Mr. Coombs at 6:24 p.m.
That's correct, yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good.
And just one other matter I was going to do so. Over the weekend, I took a couple of figures out of, or illustrations out of the footpath link ownership statement document, and I've overlaid one with the other just to give an indication about the proposed footpath link. And I've shown it to both councils. They don't have a problem with it, sir, if you're minded to take it.
That seems fine to me on the basis that the other parties are content with it.
Well, so can I just put up a health warning? Mr. Story very kindly showed me the plan and explained to me and then later to Mr. Marsh what he sought to derive from this drawing you're about to receive. For my part, on behalf of the parents, I don't actually see that it goes to anything that's relevant to your decision, because as I understand it, Mr. Story will confirm, he's not suggesting the plan he's going to give you indicates that there is some piece of land out with the necessary control of the appellants for the purpose of Appeal B, which is the only point that I could understand to be of relevance to you. So I don't resist you having it, but I do indicate that perhaps I don't see what the relevance of it may be, unless it can be explained in some way as having relevance. Now, whether that's done as it's introduced or whether it's done through Mr. Marsh, I don't mind, but just as long as you're aware, at the moment we don't see that it takes any matter that's pertinent to your decision any further than you already have it, which is that all the land ownership required has now been secured.
Well, that's noted. We'll see. Which witness were you intending to refer to it, please, Mr. Story?
It would be Mr. Marsh,
Mr.
and
Marsh.
I have obviously shown it to him as indicated. And it's about the extent of the ownership, and basically that the hedge in Westwood Close is the matter in dispute.
All right. Well, let's see where that takes us. But I know what you say as well, Mr. Boyle. Is there anything else before we turn to Mr. Jones on the screens? No. Well, on that basis, Mr. Boyle, can we hear from Mr. Jones, please?
So thank you very much indeed. So Mr. Jones, as you can see, is in position. I think it's a little bit like something from North Korea, these huge figures of Mr. Jones all around the room. You've got a better haircut than North Korea, though, Mr. Jones. Can I ask you to have relevant documents? So you should have, I hope, and my version, they're all separate. So summary, proof, figures, appendices, rebuttal, they're all from Mr. Jones, and then the transport statement of common ground with the authority. I think those are the only documents we're going to need.
Okay, I've got all of those.
And what I was proposing to do with your leave, so given that this is evidence directed to third-party concerns, is I'll introduce the witness. I will ask him to read some passages of his summary and also some passages of his rebuttal, not all of it, and then we'll look at some of the documents and some of the figures.
Yes, please. Probably should have done this earlier. Can I just double-check you can hear us, Mr. Jones?
Yes, I can hear you loud and clear, and obviously privileged to be called a director of North Korea.
Okay. The sound isn't great, at least for my ears. Is there any chance of just turning up Mr. Jones ever so slightly? Oh, sorry.
That's not something really we can do. Sadly, it's kind of as good as it can be here.
Okay. Well, let's hopefully we can all hear. But if anybody is struggling at any point, if you could let me know, please. Okay.
Thank you, sir. I must say, I thought the sound got slightly better as Mr. Jones got into it. Is it to do with your microphone, Mr. Jones? Can you...
I'll put myself a bit closer to my laptop if that helps.
Maybe that's the way to do it. Mr. Jones, can I take you to your principal proof, please, where I can introduce you? I discover there you're Anthony Jones, is that correct?
Correct.
And you're a Director Transport at the Pegasus Group. You hold a Bachelor of Science degree with honours in Environmental Assessment in the construction industry. You're a member of the Chartered Institution of Highways and Transportation, is that correct?
That's correct.
You tell us you've been actively involved in providing highways and transportation planning, advice relating to development process since 2002, advised a wide variety of clients operating residential, retail, leisure, industrial and office sectors. Experience ranges from initial feasibility studies to expert witness duties on projects located throughout the UK and to include proposals for development in North Somerset and elsewhere in the south and southwest of England. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And then at 1.3 you set out the usual statement of truth. Thank you very much. Put your main proof to one side for a moment, please, and take up your summary. Do you have that?
Yes, I do.
And we can see from section 2 of your summary the scope. As we all know, the inspector has 2 appeals in front of him. Appeal A, which is the principal application for planning permission, outline planning permission, and then Appeal B, which concerns the footpath link and cycle link to the north of the site. What I'd like you to do, please, is to start at your paragraph 2.9, which is a summary of the position with the Highways Authority. Now, we know the Highways Authority has no objection to the scheme, and we have a statement of common ground to that effect, which we'll look at a moment. But if you could just read from 2.9 through to 2.14, please.
Certainly. The Highway Authority at North Somerset Council has no highway objections to either Appeal A or Appeal B, and considered all the issues relating to access, accessibility, traffic impact and highway pedestrian safety in its consultation responses prepared in response to both plan applications. This is subject to suggested conditions and Section 106 obligations as follows. Provision of a construction traffic management plan, boundary treatment to ensure vegetation no higher than 600 millimetres within any visibility space provided, Section 106 contributions towards the following: home to school transport, local public transport connections, and £120 per dwelling vouchers for public transport. It also includes reinstatement of full height curbs along Butts Batch to be secured via a Section 278 agreement. There is no reason for refusal alleging that Butts Batch is an unsafe and unsuitable pedestrian and cycle connection to the village centre from the appeal site, subject to the mitigation measures that is proposed for Appeal A with respect to the provision of full height curbs. However, in addition to Appeal A, Appeal B provides a further pedestrian connection from the northwest boundary of the appeal site to Westwood Close. The delivery of the proposed connection is dealt with within Mr. March's evidence and does not comprise part of my evidence. As set out in detail in Mr. March's evidence, the appeal proposals only represent a conflict with the final paragraph of CS 32 service villages, with consideration to the process that the appeal scheme has been brought forward from a procedural perspective. It is therefore my understanding that the Highway Authority at North Somerset Council do not consider that the appeal is contrary to the following aspects of CS 32. This is in relation to the bullet points concerning it does not result in significant adverse cumulative impacts, such as highway impacts, likely to arise from existing and proposed development within the wider area. The location of the development maximises opportunities to reduce the need to travel and encourage active travel modes and public transport, and it demonstrates that safe and attractive pedestrian routes are provided to facilities within the settlement within reasonable walking distance. It is my understanding that this position was confirmed by the Council in the Case Management Conference meeting held on the 27th of April 2022.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jones. Now, paragraph 215 of your summary mentions that you're seeking to agree a statement of common ground with the Highways Authority. That was indeed achieved on the 21st of June, in terms of the version that I've got at least. So can we take that up now, please?
Yes.
And if you turn, first of all, to the introduction on page 1,
Yeah.
we can see paragraph 1.5, the issues that are dealt with within the Statement of Common Ground are the application site and application proposal, access to facilities and amenities by walking, cycling and public transport, vehicular access and trip impact, planning conditions, obligations, areas of agreement and dispute. And we can see at 1.6, Statement of Common Ground confirms all matters of highway safety are agreed and there are no areas of dispute with the North Somerset Council. Yeah?
That's
And
correct.
if we flick to the very end of the document, it's page 9 of the text, that is, rather than the figures.
Yes.
You got that? 4.1
Yeah.
is agreed there are no areas of dispute with the local highway authority subject to off-site mitigation, planning conditions and contributions. Yep.
That's correct.
So that's the recorded position. And then if we just pick up the headings, the appeal cites section 2. You deal there, you and the authority, with the description of the local highway network.
Yes.
And we can see at 2.10 a reference to, although there's no segregated local cycle routes within Wrington, all the roads and streets in Wrington Village are suitable routes to be used by cyclists. Yeah?
That's correct. Yes.
And it might just be worth, we just pick up the extant speed limits at paragraph 217, 218.
Yeah.
There was a 20-mile-an-hour limit, which was then extended in January of this year. Is that right?
That's correct. Yes.
And if we just keep a finger in there, you can take up your figures. The first of those is just simply a locational figure, figure 1, which gives us the names of the various roads and the location of the appeal site.
That's correct.
You have that? And then
Yes.
if you, I'm going to skip over the next 2 figures. No, 3 figures. 4 figures. Figure, well, it's appendix, Statement of Common Ground, stroke C, extent of Wrington 20-mile-an-hour speed limit. Do you have that?
I do. Yes.
And that should show the inspector the red, which was the existing order, and then it was extended. We can see Butts Batch as part of that extended order, and we can see the network within Wrington itself.
Yeah, it's extended just to the north of the site boundary that runs parallel to Butts Patch at that location.
Thank you very much indeed. And the inspector will be very familiar now, but one can see not only where the appeal site is, but also it says PO for post office in the centre of the village. We know where the church is, and of course we know where the primary school is up to the north-east.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Just also we'll pick up here, if we may, the industrial estate area towards Cox's Green, the business park.
Yes, you've got the Harvard Business Park and the industrial estate here as well.
Thank you very much. Back to your text then, please, with the Statement of Common Ground, page 3.
Yes.
Highway safety. Would you mind just reading 219 to 221 and 222, please?
Certainly. It is agreed that there is no material existing highway accident pattern or problem on the highway network in the immediate proximity of the site, nor within the wider Wrington area, based on the personal injury accident data in the approximate 5-year period, 2017 to 2021. It is agreed that it is normal to only assess the last few years of data, although a longer period is available here for completeness. It is agreed that the local highway, footway and cycling routes operate with no identified adverse highway safety pattern ratio. Pedestrians and cyclists currently do and will continue to use these routes. It is agreed that the additional trips forecast as part of the application site will not have a significant impact on the safety of the local junctions, on-street parking, or the general safety or operation of the local highway network.
Thank you very much indeed. We'll come back to that when we deal with QA issues. But do we see the next heading is entitled Proximity to Local Services and Facilities?
Yes.
And there's a reference there to your figure stroke 2, which is one of the ones I passed over. Could you turn that up now, please? It's a pull-out sheet in my version.
Yeah, I have that.
And that should, I hope, show in yellow the bus route 51.
Yes.
And the bus stops in little red dots. And then you've got coloured notations for various types of attractors and services, facilities, education, shops, leisure, and employment.
That's correct.
Yep. And just keeping that page open, if you wouldn't mind reading for us 223 and 224.
As shown on figure SOCGH and T2, it is agreed that the existing services, facilities, amenities and public transport opportunities within Wrington are located within 2 kilometres walking distance of the appeal site. It is agreed that the application site is located within acceptable walking distances of the village primary school, based on guidance set out in the Chartered Institute of Highways and Transportation document providing for journeys on foot. The relevant extract is included in Appendix D. It is agreed that the location of the appeal site to the primary school, the existing pedestrian and cycle routes, and proposed mitigation measures are appropriate to allow future residents to walk or cycle to the primary school as genuine alternative car travel, and I would include all the amenities and facilities within Wrington within that statement.
Thank you very much. Now, with that in mind, would you mind turning to your main proof? Don't put your statement of common ground away, but your main proof,
Yeah.
where you deal with this topic within section 4. And I'm going to pick it up at page 11. So it's within the heading accessibility.
Yes.
You've got locational characteristics starting 4.1, and then there's a heading facilities and amenities starting 4.8.
Yes,
You have that, and you have a table 4.1 which sets those out,
it does.
and we can see the facility first of all listed in the first column of the table, then the location, and then we have distances depending on the 2 routes taken, either out of the Butts Batch entrance or through the Westwood Close entrance. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And then you've helpfully given us what that means in terms of time for walking and time for cycling.
That's correct, yes.
And are any of these facts here in dispute with the local highway authority?
No.
No, thank you very much indeed. And just if you wouldn't mind, just read for us 4.8 to 4.11.
Certainly. Wrington has a primary school, nursery, post office, convenience store, public houses, pharmacists, veterinary practice, memorial hall, sports and social club and places of worship. Secondary and post-16 education is provided at Churchill Academy in sixth form. Employment opportunities are provided at the Burnell Industrial Estate and Hayvat Road Trading Estate to the southeast of the settlement. Bus stops are located approximately 200 metres northward of the site at Bus Batch, providing access to daytime services that connect to Weston-super-Mare, from which bus and national rail services to Bristol and elsewhere can be accessed. The settlement of Yatton, Langford, Congsby, there is a mistake there, that should be Winscombe rather than Wrington. Sandford and Barnwell are located within a 30-minute cycle ride of the site. Regular rail services between Bristol and Weston-super-Mare are accessible in Yatton within a 15-minute drive. Detailed connectivity by cycle route will link Yatton along the Strawberry line upon delivery of the safeguarded cycle route, that's dedicated connectivity. The site is located within the 20 to 35-minute drive of Weston-super-Mare and a 30 to 40-minute drive of Bristol.
Thank you very much. Now, if you go to the end of that table, 4.1, do you see reference to Wrington Vale Medical Practice, Pudding Pie Lane?
I do, yes.
Transans in Langford, yeah? And you've given us the distances there. And I don't know whether, because I know you've not been terribly well the last couple of weeks, whether you were listening in on the evidence of third parties on the day that we had a day at Wrington. Did you hear that?
I caught glimpses of it. It might be sensible just to re-familiarise myself with
The
some of the
inspector
points.
will recall there was mention made of the fact there used to be, I think it was actually a satellite doctor surgery within Wrington itself, and then a couple of years ago that's closed down, and the Wrington Vale Medical Practice in Longford is now the nearest doctor's surgery. Yeah.
Yes.
Firstly, just in terms of location, being 3 kilometres away, what's your view as to the accessibility of that medical practice?
It is certainly accessible by cycling. Obviously, it does depend on on the type of illness that person has, but it's also located within a very short drive. If the person that needs to see the doctor has that option, it's not a significant distance to drive. And secondly, I understand there are community bus services provided within Wrington that do provide sort of a bus service to the medical facilities subject to prior arrangement.
Thank you very much. Now, that community bus service, is that the same as, or is that different, additional to the bus service we know as 51?
That's in addition. So you can also obviously use the 51 bus service to travel to Churchill and Langford, notably sort of from 9 o'clock to sort of 5:30.
Okay, well, let's just look at the public bus service, first of all. Again, Statement of Common Ground, your appendices.
Yes.
And this time it's Appendix E. Appendix E, you got that?
I've got that, yes.
And hopefully the map you'll be able to see for 51, Wrington, the Golden Lion.
That's right, I've got that, yes.
And there's a loop, but if one travels due south on the half-yard road, one comes to Langford Post Office.
That's correct, yes.
And if one looks to the timetable, doesn't matter which we choose, I'm going from Wrington to Weston-super-Mare direction,
yes.
we find, 5 minutes travel time between the Golden Lion in Wrington and the Langford Post Office stop.
That's correct. Yeah. It's a very short 5-minute bus journey.
5-minute bus journey. Obviously, as you rightly say, the timetable is there. It's morning through to the afternoon, and anyone looking at it, they can see it's about a 2-hour gap between each of the journeys, each of the yes. services. But you say in addition to that, there's a community service. Tell us how that operates.
I understand that it operates by, obviously you make an appointment with the GP. The details are set out in Appendix G of the Statement of Common Ground. But effectively, you phone up the volunteers of the community service and they will look to transport you to your GP appointment.
Thank you very much. You say Appendix G. Appendix G that I've got is adopted highway record. But I do see a reference, if one goes to the text of the Statement of Common Ground at page 5, paragraph 229.
Yes, that's correct.
You could just read that for us. Community transport options.
There are also community transport options available in Wrington, details of which are in Appendix G. Wrington Helpline is a car scheme that provides lift for medical trips and compassionate visits for those who have no access to transport or are unable to drive themselves. Wrington Minibus Society is a wheelchair accessible minibus scheme for residents and organisations. I understand that's more of a sort of recreational leisure type community service to go to, say, supermarket or to Weston-super-Mare.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. On the basis of those observations in the text, we see that your view, please, as to the accessibility to services and facilities, and indeed the suitability of the quantum of services and facilities and their range for residents by non-car mode.
Well, I think it's important to note that Wrington is a service village. I note that obviously there's a wide range of amenity and facilities within the village themselves. I think the only change of late in terms of the key facilities that I understand with regards to the public houses, the convenience store, pharmacy, post office, is obviously the medical facility, which was a satellite facility, and I think the opticians is now gone. But you still have employment opportunities, you've got recreational and leisure facilities in terms of the sports ground. So you've got all you need to acquire on a daily basis within the village. Anything that's not there is located within a reasonably short drive or accessible by bus to Langford or Churchill.
Thank you very much. And to what extent do you understand that to be in dispute with the Highways Authority?
Well, as set out in my proof of evidence and further to the case management conference, it's not in dispute.
Thank you. Can I turn to Appeal B, please? I'm going to pick it up within Statement of Common Ground, Section 3, at page 7.
Statement of Common Ground, page 7. Yes.
Appeal B. And I just ask you, please, to read two paragraphs, paragraph 314 and 315.
Yes. The proposals were accompanied by a draft deed of easement, which may be agreed to secure the appropriate rights of public users in perpetuity. The deed of easement has yet to be completed, although I think it has been. Yes. It is agreed that the proposed pedestrian access from the appeal scheme to Westwood Close is appropriate in terms of safety and operation. It is agreed that the pedestrian connection is sought in order to provide a more convenient and attractive route for future pedestrians of the appeal scheme, particularly those residing in the northwest corner of the site to local amenities and facilities in Wrington. It is agreed that the pedestrian connection is not sought because the Highway Authority consider that the proposed pedestrian route via bus batch is unsafe, subject to appropriate mitigation measures.
Thank you very much. Let's then, don't put the document away, turn up your summary once more, and we'll turn to the Rule 6 party, that's Qua's position. And for this, please go to page 3, paragraph 216.
Yeah, certainly.
And if you wouldn't mind just reading 216, then we'll look at some other points.
Keep Wrington as Wrington or Qua has Rule 6 status. I consider that the key transport issues identified in its statement of case are whether 1. The site is accessibly located. 2. There are any safe and attractive routes between the appeal site and local amenities and facilities in Wrington. The proposed pedestrian connection via Westwood Close is safe and deliverable. The proposed access arrangements and off-site highway improvements on Butch Batch are safe and appropriate, and the impact on the operation of the local highway network is acceptable.
Thank you very much. Now, again, just to confirm, any of those 5 points shared as concerns by the local highway authority?
No.
No. Thank you. Can you just turn the page then? You have a heading summary and conclusions. I think we can skip over the summary bit, but if we can just start again at 4.6.
Yes.
Thank you.
And that to really prove to the end.
Please.
I conclude that Wrington is a service village. As such, it is defined as a settlement suitable to accommodate further expansion and growth. In designating Wrington as a village, consideration was given to the appropriateness of the local pedestrian cycle routes, including the public right-of-way network, noting that they are historic and not provided in accordance with modern guidance. I conclude that Wrington is served by a good mix of services, facilities and amenities. All facilities are located within reasonable walking and cycling distance of the site. I also conclude that all facilities and amenities in Congsby, Yatton, Langford, Sandford and Banwell, including Winscombe, are included within the convenient 10-kilometre cycling distance of the appeal scheme. I conclude that the appeal site is well located in terms of minimising trip lengths when compared to the Unity Authority and national averages. I conclude that the local bus and rail services are appropriate. I conclude that travel by bus, cycle and rail, even in part with the initial reminder of the journey by car, constitutes sustainable travel for commuting, shopping or leisure trips to other settlements. I conclude that the agreed package of sustainability and travel plan measures agreed with the Highway Authority provide the opportunity to reduce dependence on the private car. However, it is my view that the provision of a new pedestrian connection to Westwood Close is not an essential link to ensure that the site is accessibly located. This is because I consider that the pedestrian access point and route via the primary access to the development site at Butts Batch provides a safe and appropriate pedestrian route that is comparable to the distances via Westwood Close when taken from the centre of the site to local amenities and facilities in Wrington. This is subject to the reinstatement of full height curves on Station Road. I conclude that the scheme is not reliant on the delivery of the pedestrian connection to Westwood Close should the planning inspector consider that the pedestrian connection is not necessary or ultimately not deliverable. I acknowledge that car journeys to local facilities and amenities will often be the major means of travel for residents of the appeal scheme, as it is in many areas, both urban and rural. However, in my view, the location of the appeal scheme is suitably placed to provide realistic, sustainable transport choices to wider destinations and reduce the dependence on travel by car. I conclude that the appeal scheme is accessibly located, provide the opportunity to reduce the need to travel by car to wider facilities. I conclude that the pedestrian routes between the appeal site and local amenities and facilities in Wrington are safe and attractive and appropriate to accommodate the increase in use associated with the appeal scheme. Mr. March's evidence confirms that the proposed pedestrian connection can be delivered within land within the applicant's control and/or within the adopted highway extents without the need for third-party land. Chapter 3 of my main evidence confirms that the pedestrian connection has been subject to a Stage 1 road safety audit that did not raise any highway safety issues. Chapter 3 of my evidence also confirms that the Highway Authority does not consider that the pedestrian route via bus patch is unsafe, subject to the proposed mitigations to provide full-height curves on bus patch within which the appellant is willing to provide, which is now also agreed within the Statement of Common Ground. I conclude that safe and appropriate access can be provided onto bus patch. I conclude that the appeal site will not have an acceptable highway safety impact or a severe operational impact on the local highway network. I finally conclude that there is no highway or transportation-related reasons why the application scheme should not be allowed.
Thank you very much. Go back, if you wouldn't mind, again, to the Statement of Common Ground, and it's figure 2 within Appendix 1.
Yes.
Where we were looking, it shows the facilities and services, and we see Butts Batch. Yeah.
Yes.
You'll also be familiar, the inspector will now as well, with Silver Street.
Yes.
Leading down to Cox's Green. And just while we're here, there was a plan which I deliberately turned over, which is public rights of way in Wrington. It's Appendix/A.
Yes.
And it shows, I hope you can see, purple dotted lines.
Yeah, it shows that there's a network within the sort of residential area to the northwest of the site.
Thank you very much. So if we keep in mind the purple dotted lines as well as the highways that are shown on your drawing stroke 2. Yeah.
Yes.
Firstly, can you help me with, to what extent have you personally walked and experienced the highway network within Wrington from the point of view of a pedestrian?
I've walked all the routes. I've been there on a number of occasions, and I deem them not to be sort of out of context of what you would expect for a rural village.
Thank you very much. Now, the inspector will have seen, we're well aware that within the centre of Wrington there are areas where either there are no footways, or there are reduced widths of footways, or there's indication of a path on the carriageway as opposed to a separate pavement. Yeah.
Yes.
He will also now know the situation in Silver Street. Are you familiar with the Cox's Green decision by his colleague?
Yeah, I am, yes.
And
yes,
without being specific, in very broad terms, what was the conclusion in respect of the acceptability of that kind of network in this kind of village for residential movements to and from houses to services and facilities?
I think as set out in paragraph 5.6 of my main evidence and paragraph 45 of that decision, I think the inspector for the Cox Green decision was quite clear that he didn't see any highway safety or attractiveness issues with those routes.
Thank you. And how, in your view, would that apply to the route from the appeal site into the centre of the village?
It would. If anything, we are slightly better than Cox Green, because we've only got, I think, a 20-metre section to the north of Westwood Close where there's no footway provision, where they have a longer section on Silver Street. But even so, even with that section, I've been to site a number of times, and I've seen pedestrians of all ranges, parents, pushchairs, using that network with no real concerns. It's quite well used.
Thank you very much. With that in mind, could you take up your rebuttal, please?
Yes.
There are 2 sections here. I'm not going to ask you to read section 3, which was, it's now Mrs. Edgar, her evidence. We've been through that in some detail with her orally. But could you take up section 2?
Yes.
And you record at 2122 Miss Marwood's concerns. Can you start at 23, please?
Certainly. In my view, The issues considered in Ms Marwood's evidence relate to the existing layout and operation of the local highway, footway, cycleway and public right-of-way networks in Wrington. No qualitative evidence, in my view, has been provided by Ms Marwood to confirm how the highway and pedestrian networks in Wrington operate and how the impact of the appeal scheme would be unacceptable by way of personal injury accident records, existing traffic flows and speeds, pedestrian and cycle numbers and forecast increases in vehicles, pedestrians and cycle numbers to supportive views as set out in paragraph 2.2 above. It is my view that this should have been provided, noting my views in paragraph 6.38 of my main evidence with respect to how this should be considered. It is my view that this approach correctly considered by both the appellant, myself, and the Highway Authority at North Somerset Council.
Thank you. We can skip over 2.4. That's reference to Cox's Green we've touched on. 2.5, please.
In my view, the photographs presented by Ms Marwood evidence supports the comments set out in paragraph 2.4 above, as well as the agreed position of the Highway Authority that despite the historic layout of Wrington and lack of footway provision in places, pedestrians and cyclists do use and will continue to use the local routes, in particular photographs 6, 7, 8, 13, 14 and 15. And I think Ms Marwood in evidence obviously did state that she does use the routes to go to the local school on a daily basis.
Thank you. And then over the page, just 2.9 and 2.10. Thank you.
Paragraph 6.38 to 6.46 of my evidence sets out my view that the appeal scheme will not have a material impact on how the historic highway arrangements in Wrington currently operate, and that the pedestrian routes between the appeal site and local communities in Wrington are safe and attractive and appropriate to accommodate the increase in use associated with the appeal scheme. This is understood to be the agreed position the Highway Authority has set out in paragraphs 2.8, 210, 219, 221, 222, 325, 326, 327 and 4.1 of the Highway Statement of Common Ground.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jones. Is there anything else at this stage you want to pick up in chief?
No.
Thank you very much, sir. Then.
Mr. Storer, can we have your questions, please, for Mr. Jones?
Thank you, sir. Mr. Jones, good morning.
Good morning.
Just to start, I think you've referenced the evidence given in the Memorial Hall in your evidence. Is that correct, or was I mistaken?
No, I believe it was Ms Marwood when she gave evidence in chief at in the town centre hall last Thursday.
Yes, I think there was some confusion, maybe it's mine. So unfortunately you weren't present when the number of villagers turned up in the Memorial Hall and expressed a certain number of views about the scheme.
I wasn't personally, but I did ensure that a colleague within our department was present, Alex Snart, and obviously I've been given notes from my colleagues as part of the appeal team.
Excellent. So you'll be aware that a lot of people don't agree with your assessment of how accessible the village is via footways or the local lanes, and your assessment that you can walk to the doctor's surgery would not be their understanding of how the lanes work and how dangerous they are.
Is this the doctor's surgery in Churchill, or are we talking where he was previously in Wrington?
The Pudding Lane, the current one, after the previous one was closed in 2012.
Yeah, I've not advocated that people should walk to that doctor's surgery. Obviously, it's beyond the 2-kilometre walking distance that's advised by manual for streets. It is within the sort of 10-kilometre cycling distance, but obviously that does depend on the nature of the illness that person has as to his ability to cycle, but they do have the option. They've also got the option to use the 51 public public transport service, and I understand obviously the community bus does provide that if the appropriate arrangements are made.
Yes, so I raise it because you mention it and you've included it in figures to show that these things are accessible by foot, when I think you're just acknowledging that they're not actually accessible on foot.
I would accept that the distance for the medical facility in Churchill is beyond a normal reasonable walking distance. I think the purpose of the table in my evidence was to provide both walking and cycling distances. So it was to show that, you know, whilst the doctor's surgery is unfortunately no longer operating as satellite facilities in Wrington, there are still sustainable transport options to travel to and from that facility during its opening hours.
I'm getting notes that say that it was actually a full surgery and it wasn't satellite, but that's a moot point at this time. It's gone. So you also referenced that you could get the bus, the 51 bus, and you could go to the post office, I believe, in Langford, and then walk to the doctor's surgery. Did you do that? Have you got any idea how far that might be and how practical it is?
I haven't personally done that trip myself, no.
So if I said it was sort of half a mile and not particularly accessible, then it would take to 10-15 minutes of somebody who was reasonably fit and able. Would that sound about right from your assessment?
If that's what you're advising, I have no reason to dispute that. But obviously, using public transport and walking to and from facilities, you know, it's normal to have, you know, sometimes an extended walking distance either end. You know, the national travel journey by bus is around 37 minutes. And if you allow for walking from the site to the bus stop and the 5-minute journey plus your 15 minutes, I still think we're well within that average travel journey by bus.
And the timetable for a 51 bus, I believe, is sort of once every 2 hours during the day. So having made your appointment, got there, hopefully at a convenient time for the buses, you're still going to have either a long wait before or after, because of the infrequency of the service.
I wouldn't say they're infrequent, I would say they're regular. They obviously, you can plan your journey around them. Obviously, the service frequency is what it is. I don't think that's changed materially to the previous A5 service. I think that was still a sort of an hour and a half, 2 hourly service. But you still have the option. In my view, you can still use it. Obviously, there will be an element of flexibility to be used by some of the people who go there for the GP surgery, but nevertheless, you can still use it. And if needed, you can always, you know, use the community bus service for trips back. It's all about options, in my view.
Absolutely, and but I'm coming to the point that your assessment generally is that Wrington is well connected by public services and easy reach to nearby villages and services. That wouldn't seem to be strictly correct.
No, I would still stand by that. You need to consider the national planning policy framework with understanding the opportunities to maximise sustainable transport in certain areas with certain more flexibility given to locations from rural areas. But Wrington is defined as a service village. Obviously, it would have been defined as a service village, noting that some of those facilities and amenities may not be in that village, but could be located in nearby villages. And that's an appropriate way to determine accessibility for rural villages. They do operate to some extent as a support network.
I've been told that with the increase in general population, so a cumulative development within the area, the local facility, GP facilities, are now becoming inadequate. So if you continue to build this proposed site, you would be adding to that cumulative development that is overwhelming the health services.
I think that those issues are wider planning issues in terms of capacity. My role as a transport planner is to advise on the options that are available. Those options are still there, whether things are at capacity or not. But obviously, as part of the plan application, if there's deemed a need to, there would be a request for contributions to look to improve some of the facilities and amenities. But I think it would be remiss of me to get into detail about that, because that's not what my evidence considers.
And your opinion is that the local road network is sufficient for additional cars?
It's certainly my opinion, as set out in the 2 revisions of my transport statement that we submitted. But more importantly, it's also a view supported by and agreed by in the statement of common ground by the Highway Authority. You know, the local highway network is, after all, their roads. They're responsible for the safe maintenance and operation of that road. And you know, I've been involved in many schemes where, unfortunately, they've disagreed with me, but in this instance, they do agree with me, and I think that should be given some considerable weight.
And I understand that your the council have agreed, but as you say, as the residents of Wrington who have to deal with this situation every day, I think our view is obviously important in this matter. Wouldn't you agree?
Of course, I wouldn't dismiss the view of local opinion. Obviously, that's the reason why we have public consultation events, to sometimes get to understand some of the local issues. But ultimately, our assessment needs to be independent, it needs to be qualitative, and it needs to be done in accordance with best practice. All of which, in my view, and I think also is a view agreed by our authority, has been carried out for this scheme. We've done a detailed transport assessment. We reviewed the access and the footways with consideration to traffic flows, speeds, number of pedestrians that use it, and the impact over and above that. And I think it's important to consider in this respect that the key test from a transport point of view is set out in the National Planning Policy Framework at paragraphs 111 in particular, that that schemes should only be refused on transport grounds if they deem to be unacceptable impact on highway safety, which both myself and the Highway Authority don't agree is the position in this case, and whether the cumulative impact of the scheme is severe, which again is not the case in this case. You know, I don't seek to dismiss the local opinion, that you're entitled to your views, you're entitled to disagreeing with me. But my role in the Highway Authority's role is to look at this on a more subjective basis based on best practice.
Okay, thank you. I have referenced before, and I think it's worth mentioning again, that the local MP has said, described these roads as a nightmare. It's in the document of our appendices of his speech. So his assessment of the local roads were that they're a nightmare because they are sort of narrow lanes. Have you got a view on that?
Again, I think it comes down to what I previously said. Obviously, I've been to many public consultation and inquiries where local residents have expressed exactly the same view. It's not uncommon, but it's our role, but more importantly, the role of the Highway Authority, who are responsible for the safe operation of it, is that they deem them to be appropriate. And I think the key test from a planning perspective is whether we materially affect their operation to an unacceptable highway safety level or severe impact, and neither is the case in this instance.
I think the point I'm trying to make is that you obviously have your opinion, and obviously as the expert, but the wider opinion is that this scheme is in the wrong place. You've referenced Cox's Green. That's to the southeast of Wrington. It has sort of direct access via some small roads to the A38. as was raised by local parish councillors of Churchill who represent Lower Langford, they anticipate, quite rightly, that the traffic will mostly go through there. Have you studied the Lower Langford road system?
Not in detail as part of this assessment. We've done it based on an agreed scope of work with the Highway Authority, and they consider that the impact is not material, to not consider the impact on the wider network further than what we've covered in our transport statement in Wrington. And that's because they're content that the scheme does not have, I know I'm going to repeat myself a number of times, a material impact, and is not in contradiction of policies and NPPF paragraphs 1, 110 and 111.
Right, but I mean, obviously it all form part of the submission, but this road has to go through either Wrington or Lower Langford. Both are bottlenecks, and so it seems odd that it hasn't been considered by yourself in your road safety audit.
Well, I think you need to be clear as to the purpose of a road safety audit and the need for a transport assessment. They are two separate things. The transport assessment is normally done on an agreed scope, which we've done here with the Highway Authority. That considers the local highway network based on what they consider is going to be materially affected for us to demonstrate if that's the case or not. They are content, and it's agreed in the statement of common ground, that it doesn't have a material impact. There's obviously a precedent in terms of impact set by the Cox Green decision, which is 59 dwellings, similar scale, and that was again accepted by the inspector. We're not dissimilar in that respect, and that's why they've not asked us to consider the wider network within the parish or district.
I mean, I come back to your assessment that it's a short, and the overall thing, it's a short distance, I believe, is one of the quotes to the A38 and the A370, but that short distance ignores the practicalities. Again, and I come back to Lower Langford, and I will raise a point that was in the Memorial Hall that you may or may not be aware of, that Mr. Matthews pointed out that the assessment would be that there would be between 750 and 1,000 HGV vehicle movements in order to supply enough building material for these houses. Have you got any thoughts on that?
Well, there'd obviously be a period where the construction of the site needs to be undertaken should the inspector grant consent. That's quite normal for residential development. It is quite normal for conditions to be stipulated for preparation of a construction management plan. I'm pretty sure something would have been done for Cox Green in that sense. If that was stipulate numbers of vehicles, I can't tell you the numbers because I'm not a contractor responsible for building the houses, but ultimately the contractors will be required to provide a construction traffic management to agreed with the local highway authority and the council to ensure that the construction is carried out appropriately. There could be, and it's quite common, for restrictions on hours. For the delivery vehicles. I note there's a number of comments made about particularly Wrington doing the school pick-up and drop-off periods, that it does get busy. Well, that can be conditioned and enforced as part of a construction traffic management plan to avoid those instances, and also choose an appropriate route to avoid the village if the roads are deemed to be suitable.
So the concerns, and as I say, I am just voicing the concerns that people raised, that these large vehicles won't actually be able to, and what I think you're saying is that you haven't been asked to make any assessment about the practicalities of getting the large construction vehicles to and from the site.
No, not in detail, because it's standard practice for these elements to be carried out subject to a condition should planning consent be be required. If the Highway Authority thought there was a material issue there, they would have asked for it up front. They have not. Obviously, the road is serviced by and used by large vehicles at present. There are no weight restrictions, I understand, within the village. So there's nothing in terms of legal enforcement to prevent those types of vehicles. So any size vehicle can use those villages at this moment in time. There are obviously, the residential areas are all being serviced by refuse vehicles. There's a bus going through it. So it's not, I appreciate the frequency might be less intense than when the construction of the site takes place, and obviously that's why it's going to be managed. But there are those types of vehicles already using the village.
Right. But there are weight restrictions on the two northern access roads. I mean, that's a fact. The signs are up. So West Hay Road and through Red Hill, those routes won't be an option. So is limited scope for which routes they use already. But as I say, I think really the point is that you haven't done an assessment and you feel it's not necessary.
Not as part of this, what is being considered as part of this appeal and the issues raised by the Highway Authority. Obviously, Cox Green would have been granted consent. It would have been given a similar condition, and I can't see if we would be doing anything dissimilar in that respect. It's quite normal for these issues in terms of construction to be considered afterwards.
Yeah, I mean, and you keep referencing Cox's Green, and I'll say again, Cox's Green, the road does not have to go through a settlement to get to the site. So I appreciate you keep referencing it, but I'm just going to finish with the observation that the geography is such that either has to go through Lower Langford or through the village and down through Station Road and the narrow access point of railway cottages. Do you accept that? I mean, is that a fact?
Well, I don't think it's a fact. It's obviously a consideration that the construction traffic management plan will need to review with the local highway authority should consent be granted for the scheme. Again, these details are normally reviewed in detail should consent be granted.
Absolutely. But okay. So I've mentioned railway cottages and railway wharf. Are you aware of that particular location in the village of Wrington?
Is this the saloon to the north of Westwood Close?
That's it. The bit with no footway along
yes.
the highway, right? And you heard Miss Marwood describing her experiences as a representative of the village, of how her experiences of using that particular bit of road.
Yes, and you know, obviously, as a parent myself with 3 young children, I can emphasise with the decisions that need to be made. But notwithstanding, you know, even Miss Marwood herself acknowledges that she still uses that route on a regular basis. Yes,
and which brings me neatly to the fact that she lives in a house that was built in 1926. I think everyone's quite, or 1930. I think we've agreed that it was pre the Second World War, so it's not post that war. It was after the First World War. So those houses were built at a time when there was less traffic. You are proposing and seem quite content to build additional houses and subject, if that's the word, the future residents to the same conditions that are already struggling to take the existing pedestrians and traffic. Is that your position? Well,
I disagree that it's struggling to take the traffic and pedestrian routes, because otherwise we would be in discussions with the highway authority. But I think the important point that you noted there was continued existing situations, and that is the key criteria that we use as part of assessments. Are we going to materially change the existing conditions? And it's my view, and agreed with the highway authority, that we do not. So in that sense, we're compliant with paragraph 111 of the MPPF, where we don't have an unacceptable highway safety issue or highway safety issue or a residual cumulative impact that is severe.
Right.
That's the policy context that we consider the scheme under.
Whilst I accept the policy, the inspector has scope, obviously, to consider various aspects, and one of those would be the safety of future residents. So, if I use the phrase caught into a pint pot, eventually it will overflow as you pour the quantity in and overwhelm that smaller pot. Yes?
I understand that the analogy, I don't think it's quite the phrase I use, but I understand what you're saying, that you think there's only a finite capacity in terms of the local network to take the additional trips. Would that be a fair summarisation?
Absolutely. I think finite capacity is precisely what the local villagers consider Wrington has already reached. And that is without the developments that are still being either built or in the pipeline, which is another 97 dwellings. So though the impact of that is yet to be established, and yet you are quite content that this will have no further safety or detrimental effects on the road system and will not flood it.
Yes, and more importantly, it's the view that is agreed by the Highway Authority. If they didn't share that view, then either we would have a reason for refusal or we would be asked for appropriate mitigation in terms of addressing capacity issues. Neither is the case in this instance. So my view is, and agreed with the Highway Authority, is that we don't exasperate the current situation. It's not a material increase in trips. I think it's one extra vehicle every 2 minutes in the peak hour. In my view, that's not going to be a material increase. No, I don't want to repeat myself quite a few times, but that is the agreed position with the Highway Authority as part of the qualitative work that we did as part of the planning commission.
Yes, and I think we have to put that into context, that there are severe limitations on how the Highways Authority can object to this, given as you say, the National Planning Policy Framework. But the local people see it and regard it as being a dangerous situation that was only going to get worse. And you have to admit that your own figures are only pulled from the database showing serious damage, serious injury accidents. KSI, killed or seriously injured, I think, are the figures that you've quoted from.
We also consider slight. There's personal injury actions it covers, there's recorded instances recorded by the police, are then included on the council's records that we obtain, and that's best practice. Any transport statement that I've done over the past 20 years, we review personal injury accident data. We've reviewed it on a number of occasions as part of this scheme. Obviously, when we first started the scheme, in terms of providing initial advice to the appellant, as part of the detailed transport statements that we prepared, and also, as part of the updated evidence that I've submitted. There is no adverse highway safety issue there in evidence. And that is, again, a position agreed and statement of common ground with the Highway Authority. When you say they're restricted in terms of what they can do, I don't think it's quite right. If they thought there was an unacceptable highway safety issue, and that's paramount and obviously very important, I understand that is not to be dismissed lightly, they would have refused it. They have not in this instance. So I would go back to my previous statements about it being agreed, and that in both my view and the Highway Authority's agreement, we don't have an impact on the local highway safety record or operation.
Am I right in thinking that your road safety audit was mainly to do with the access junction that was going to be created onto the proposed development?
We've done two. We've done a safety audit as the access for PLA, and we've done, as part of PLB, the proposed pedestrian connection between the northern extent of the site and Westwood Close.
But not any... I mean, I just finish on the point that that is the only bit of road safety auditing you did, and you're relying on the fact that the Highways Authority didn't question any of your other figures. Is that correct?
I think, again, as I mentioned earlier, you're confusing the role of a transport assessment and a safety audit. So the transport assessment would have considered the holistic operation of the current highway and pedestrian networks in Wrington, and as part of that, we would review if there's any adverse highway safety issue or pedestrian. There aren't any. Footway widths, road widths, and then advised if we thought they were operating safely or not, which is what the transport statement says, and then quantify our impact over and above that, which we deem not to be material. The reason for the safety audits is a particular assessment of a new piece of infrastructure proposed by the scheme. So it's an audit of basically what we're proposing as part of the scheme, the access and the pedestrian connection, and that scope and the conclusions have been agreed with the Highway Authority. If they shared your view that it was limited in scope, it's quite normal for them to ask us to expand it. Again, they're quite content that what's been done here is appropriate, and they've agreed matters on that basis.
Okay, well, I will move on. I think we differ. So your contention is that the pedestrian footway or foot access to the site is sufficient if it were to be along Butts Batch northwards from the new entrance proposed. Is that correct?
Can you just qualify the statement again, please, if that's okay?
Sorry, yes, it was to do with your provision, or your assessment is that, in a word, a PLB isn't necessary because you think that the pedestrian access from the new entrance, the proposed entrance to the proposed site, along Butts Batch running north is sufficient and perfectly satisfactory.
Yes, I think it's quite clear in the statement of common ground that the need for the pedestrian connection between the northern boundary and Westwood Close is that, in the Highway Authority's view, is provided to minimise the walking distances, from the site to the local community facilities, and to avoid a bit of backtracking within the scheme. Although I would state that even with a little bit of backtracking, we're still comparable distances away in terms of accepted distances to local communities as best practice. But in terms of subject to mitigation, in terms of the provision of full height curbs on Butts Batch to prevent the on-street parking, the Highway Authority are agreed that the routes are safe and appropriate.
Right. It's odd that, but it's probably not something that you can answer about why the appeal B has gone in that case. So, just looking at your rebuttal evidence for Miss Marwood.
Yes.
2.3. You've I think pretty much in rebuttal to that as well, but well, not rebuttal, but you set out various alternative footpaths, alternatives to using Station Road. That's correct, isn't it? It's in your document entitled Figures, and it is figure 2, I believe. Series of 5 maps of. Doesn't give. It's page 5 of the AJH, proof of evidence, Wrington appeal, figures.
Is this the rebuttal proof or the main proofs, please?
No, it's your part of your main evidence, proof of evidence. I think you've already referenced them for your own counsel.
Yes.
And you described how you walked them.
Yes.
You've seen, because you've done the rebuttal, and I think you even referenced them, but you described them as being quite adequate alternatives. Is that correct?
Yeah, in my view, the vast majority of them are appropriate for anyone to use, particularly during good weather conditions. Obviously, in some cases, there might be sort of lack of lighting or sometimes overlook issues, but I think I acknowledge in my evidence that they are suitable for certain people, but we're not totally reliant on them.
Before I go further, and obviously I do appreciate you on the screen, but I am going to ask you whether, when you walk them, that you are doing so as a, normally, I take it again, you've had COVID, but fit and able person?
I am, of course, but also I need to understand if they are able to be used by other persons, parents with pushchairs or disabled. We've been to site on a number of occasions, and my colleague went to site and walked the routes after the sit-in in Wrington last week, and what we observed doesn't change my conclusions that they are well used by the local residents. They wouldn't be if they're not, and I think in designating Wrington as a service privilege, a review of the public right-of-way routes was that they're of good quality. There might be one which is to the back of some of the houses on the glebe, which is a little bit of a worse standard than others that might not be used, but then you have got the alternative to use the glebe to go round and miss that to come back in on yourself.
Right. Do you have Miss Marwood's statement to hand there?
I do, yes.
So if I turn to photo 9, or ask you to turn to photo 9 and photo 10.
Bear with me a second.
Can you, obviously there are a lot of people watching who won't be able to see what you're looking at. Can you just describe what you're looking at, please?
Yeah, if you just bear with me whilst I get the evidence. Can you repeat the photograph numbers again, please?
Photograph 9 and photograph 10.
Yes. Yeah.
You recognise those pictures, do you? And,
I do.
Can you explain to the people watching who won't have access to the pictures necessarily just what they're showing?
Yeah, that's the public right-of-way that goes to the rear of the western boundary of the dwellings that front onto the glebe. You can access it as you come onto the glebe from Butspatch, an approximate sort of 40-minute walk, and that leads up then to where the Physio Training Centre is and where the medical centre used to be, and the connections and the wider public rights-of-way network there.
And I mean, this photograph, I will explain it then. So this is looking north from the glebe into the footpath behind the houses in Station Road and behind the houses in the glebe. It shows what happened. Was the daughter in photo 9 trying to push a pushchair along the unmade, unsurfaced track, and the way is totally blocked by nettles and overhanging branches. And I think Miss Marwood gave evidence that said that at that point she gave up trying to use that route, having sort of asked her daughter to walk down it. Do you remember that?
Yes,
Yes. So when you say that you've assessed it to be usable by a variety of people, some of whom would be disabled or have some sort of disability or have children, is that still your case?
I think I've acknowledged in with regard to that particular right away to the rear that is probably less suitable for pushchairs. I think the fact it's overgrown is a maintenance issue. I think having been to site last week, that's now been cleared. So it's certainly usable in a more friendly manner. It's still an option should they choose to, but I think you've got better alternatives via the glebe and then to come back on yourself.
Right. So looking at the figure, so we've established what the actual situation on the ground is. So we come back to your figures, figure 2 on page 5 of your document, where, and I talked Miss Marwood through these as well, so I'm sure you remember that. Starting at the top left-hand corner, we have the proposed site in red, and we have a black line that runs either north through Wexford Close or backtracks up into Butts Batch and runs north up Station Road, and that's the route that and into Broad Street, and that's the route that Miss Marwood takes. Is that correct?
That's what I understand to be what she advised last week. Yes.
Sorry, yeah. If you could just lean forward slightly to your microphone, I think you're a little quiet. So the next to that, on the right, there's a light blue line, and that shows how you could walk up that section of pathway that you've just seen and then cut back very quickly into Station Road and then north up into Broad Street.
Yeah.
So that's one route that I think we can agree isn't going to be suitable for everybody. Would that be correct?
If this is the route that goes behind the western boundaries of those properties on the glebe, not for everyone, but they've also got the opportunity via appropriate footways to go down the glebe. And then to come on to what is effectively, in my view, an appropriate public right-of-way network, not including that one section.
Right. Okay. I mean, just to cut this short, because I think you've just jumped ahead to where I was going to. The last option you have marked in green, and it shows how you use. In fact, no, it's not that one. I beg to differ. Sorry, it's the. I thought you did have it. Yes, no, it is the one in green. Sorry. Although you still use the cut through. So the one in purple, number 4, it goes out. It follows the glebe. It cuts back. But even this one then cuts back onto Station Road and round the bend into Broad Street, rather than following the green line, which goes up to Church Walk, goes into and then cuts through to Silver Street and back up to Broad Street. So to avoid and cutting out 1, 2, 3 of your 4 alternative options, there is only one, isn't there? That if you're going to avoid that footpath, you're going to have to walk up the glebe and then cut back through into Church Walk. Would you accept that?
To avoid that footpath, yeah, you'd have to go up the glebe, but you've got a number of different options via the public rights of way to avoid that.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to avoid that path, that footway, which you've shown on this alternative 3 out of 4 times, you will have to walk up the glebe, which is an additional further distance. And if you were to be walking to the school, you would then cut through to Church Walk, continue through Church Walk into Silver Street and then back round the roads that way.
Or you can come back onto Station Road and not be a broad street.
Yes, and okay, yes, so you mentioned that part, and if then I'm going to have to, sorry, yes, just take you back to Miss Marwood's evidence then. And we discussed this, and I'm sure you remember it. If I take you up to photo number 1 and number 2 of her evidence. Have you, tell me when you've got those. Have you got those?
Just open up the document now, if you just bear with me.
Thank you.
So this is photographs 1 and 2, is that correct?
Photographs 1 and 2.
Yeah. Yep.
So photograph 1 shows the Station Road looking south from the bend of Broad Street, and you can see a red car and a silver car that is trying to manoeuvre around the parked cars, but the way is blocked by the oncoming bin lorry. And the following photograph also shows vehicles up on the pavement. The point I'm going to make to you about these is that bit of road the curb is dropped. Cars do obviously pull onto it because we have the photographs to show it, but that people using the cut through, whether they use the glebe or whether they use the impassable rear passage, would pop out just about where that traffic chaos is occurring, where people are pulling on the curb because they've come round the corner from Broad Street, being met by oncoming vehicles and have to pull onto the pavement. So that, in terms of safety, that's not a very safe option. Would that be a reasonable assessment?
It comes down to the frequency and the occurrence of that. Every time I've been there, I've not seen that occurring. I'm not saying that it doesn't, because obviously you've shown that, but that's why we do a qualitative assessment as part of reviewing the local pedestrian routes in terms of looking at issues like that. I think we go back to the point that Wrington is historic in its nature. It doesn't conform to modern guidance, and whilst there are issues like that occurring, it nevertheless operates without causing, based on the evidence, a highway safety issue. Again, that's a view shared by myself with the Highway Authority. So that's an existing situation. It goes back to our view, do we exacerbate that existing situation? And our view is that we don't. Okay, so
we have a difference of opinion about the suitability of these other access routes. But just to, I think you've referenced it, and it's obviously part of the process. 800 metres is the generally, or the accepted model to get to a proposed site to a local facilities.
I use that as one of the guidance documents, but I think ideally, in those situations, that would be great. But it doesn't limit it to 800 metres. It does say walking trips up to 2 kilometres. Obviously, we've referred to the distances accepted by the Cox Green appeal, and that references 1.2 kilometres. Again, we're not materially different in those respects. So, and again, it's considered in the context of the rural location, whereby I think professional judgment needs to be applied considering to local context. So it's not it's guidance, but it's not a rule. is to be for each professional in each case to be decided on its own merits.
So, your own figures here, the light green option going via, well, in fact, well, if you go on your purple route, number 4, and cut back into Station Road, you're showing to just over 1,000 metres, 1 kilometre, and that's, say, using that section of road. And if you were to avoid that section of road and walk all the way round into Silver Street, you haven't actually done that without using the slightly shorter unpassable track, but you've measured it just over 1,000 metres, and so it's going to be a little bit longer than that. Are those figures that I'm looking at correct on the figure?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
But I think the point is that if you did have to use the glebe, the difference is not materially different. I think it comes down to providing choice, and also it comes down to the fact that we think these routes are appropriate as supporting networks to Butts Patch and Station Road, which we consider is appropriate, which we think most residents will use.
Given, I mean, you just referenced it in context, and I think the context of Wrington is that these aren't actually suitable. You know, this development wouldn't be suitable with the issues of pedestrian access and vehicular access. But of these routes, these alternative routes, once we cut out that unsurfaced, overgrown, impassable rear lane, there is only one real route, isn't there, through the glebe and up through Church Walk?
Well, my colleague did use that route, and you could use it if you wanted to, if you're more able-bodied and confident. So I still think you can use it, but regards to maybe less confident and pushchairs, it might not be as suitable, but you do have the glebe to use, which is a perfectly suitable alternative. I think that what it boils down to is that users have a choice. They've got 3 options: via Station Road, Butts Patch, potentially that public right-of-way to the rear for some people, more able-bodied. I think I'd accept that. But you can go around the glebe and use the public right-of-way network to the north, which are in a much better condition than the public right-of-way that you refer to.
All right, I'm going to finish this very shortly, much to everyone's relief, I'm sure. My point is that there is only potentially one route, and it's a much longer route. So Miss Marwood was correct when she said that Station Road was the preferred option, and the alternative of, well, if it's not safe, then she should drive, seems unreasonable position to take, particularly because you are then saying to all the new residents, well, if you don't feel safe, then just get in your cars. Is that a fair assessment?
No, because we consider the routes are safe and appropriate and suitable for walking, and again, a view shared by the Highway Authority. It comes down to choice. Again, you know, the MPPF is all about maximising opportunities. There's the potential to walk or cycle. I stand by that in my view. There's people can drive, and if they do drive, that's their choice, but it comes down, it's not their only choice. And if they were to drive, it's still a reasonably short distance. And I think if you in the instance of school children in particular, you know, if you look at the MPPF and the glossary in terms of what's deemed sustainable transport, car sharing is one of those. And I would very much say that car sharing with your children is part of that. It's part of a wider link trip. So what I'm saying is that ultimately it's all about context and location, and are the choices appropriate? And in my view, that applies here. They are attractive and safe and appropriate.
Okay. I'm going to just move on, I'm sorry about this, to Appeal B.
Can I just, sorry to interrupt you, Mr. Storer, just to get a gauge on where we are, and I've just got one eye on the clock in terms of being fair to Mr. Jones and giving him a break. Is there much more by way of cross-examination?
I just want to cover a couple of points, but I do appreciate I have gone on. I apologise for that.
I wasn't being critical. I just want to, just in terms of being fair to witnesses and understanding where we're up to, just in minutes, how much more do you think you've got?
I mean, probably 10 minutes, sir. I just would, but yes, by all means, if it is obviously suitable for a break, that would be absolutely fine. But, thank you.
Well, I'll ask Mr. Jones, a witness. I'm particularly mindful that you've been unwell and you're recovering. Would you like to, bearing in mind what Mr. Storer said, perhaps 10 minutes or so, would you like to press on, or would you appreciate a break now?
If I can just get a glass of water, because my voice is going a bit hoarse. But I think if it's only 10 minutes, let's just crack on and finish it, so you could have probably a better break when handover between myself and Mr. Marsh as the planning witness.
Okay. Would you like to grab your glass of water?
Yes.
Well, let's just pause to allow Mr. Jones to refresh. I won't adjourn formally. Just wait. Okay, you've reappeared. I take that to mean you've managed to do what you needed to do.
Yeah, I've got my water and suitably hydrated. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you. Back to you then, Mr. Storer. Thank you.
All right, thank you, sir. So moving on to Appeal B, do you have this document that is proposed cycleway connection Westwood Close? I'm afraid I've got the paper copy. I'm not quite sure of the, and I think it came. This was actually the agreement that was handed around the other day, sir. I'm referencing the map that's appeared on the back of it. It's between Miss Smith and Mr. Joyce are the grantors, and Hayden Garrett and Keith Garrett are the
yeah, I think these are the easement documents.
Sorry, sir. It's P19-2039-001.
I think it's found in a number of places, but I think it's Appendix F of the Statement of Common Ground on Transport is the way I have it. Okay. Appendix J.
Right, thank you very much for clarifying that. So, with reference to this, Mrs. Edgar gave evidence on this and or highlighted it of the field site, and was concerned that the initial concern was that the her hedge on the boundary was going to be cut down, and she's been assured that won't be happening because on this map it shows the positioning of a person emerging northwards from the along the footpath to the unmade track would be stood in the middle of the access to the piggeries. Is that right?
Yes, it's a shared use, and we, in order to provide those visibilities, we are directing pedestrians to that location. But as part of the detailed design of the scheme, which I think is agreed in the Statement of Common Ground, the details of the design of the scheme can be covered at that stage, but the principles are agreed.
Right. Because the highways have asked for the double barrier safety gates, these sort of staggered gates, haven't they?
They initially did, but obviously as part of the conditions that I think is going to be discussed later on, the wording has been removed to state appropriate measures or something along those lines. So whilst they've stated staggered barriers, you don't have to just provide barriers, you can provide bollards, even if it's single or double bollards. So there are solutions there to for someone as part of the detailed design to consider.
So, okay, you may be able to sort of not clear up this point really, because my point is that if you were to put any safety feature in the in that location, you would be blocking the access to the site known as the piggeries.
Yeah, but this safety feature would not be provided there. I think it would be provided on the approach to the site, right, to the south. So, obviously that track is used by vehicles, or it's quite lightly trafficked. I think particularly the piggeries is 1 or 2 vehicles a week, or I think it's stated in the statement of common ground. So that's an estimate, obviously, but it is very likely trafficked. So the intention would be to give priority to pedestrians and ultimately with being a safeguarded route, cyclists.
Right. Do you have, and it may take you a few moments to find it, Mrs. Edgar's evidence statement? Do you have that to hand?
I do, if you just bear with me whilst I load it.
Thank you.
Obviously, it would have been done under Miss Williams's previous surname, wouldn't it? The evidence, not Edgar, just for reference.
Yes, I think we have covered that it was accepted that she would now be Mrs. Edgar. Photo 2 in her evidence.
Yes.
Large HGV exiting the piggery, requiring all the access space.
Mm-hmm.
Can you see that?
I can, yes.
And would I be right in assuming that the rear offside right tyres of that vehicle would be about where your proposed sight line is?
It would be there, yes. But obviously, I think the point that I was trying to make is that those vehicles would not be there very infrequently.
Right. I'm slightly concerned about where the frequency of vehicles has come from, because my understanding is that the site is, the piggeries is well used. Where did you get the infrequency of use?
It's set out in the Statement of Common Ground at paragraph 2.16.
Okay. Thank you for that. I think that will be a matter that will need to be addressed. So it's certainly not obviously with our common ground. So if we looked at the photo number 3 of Mrs. Edgar's evidence.
Yes.
And this is titled Northern Boundary, Fence Damaged by Vehicle Squeezing Down the Track and Demonstrating Lack of Sightline from the Proposed Pedestrian Access on the left at Fork.
Yep.
And would you be able to see the pedestrian access at that point?
In my view, quite clearly.
Sorry?
In my view, quite clearly, yes. You can see.
You think that obviously we'll be doing a site visit and we can check this.
Well, that photo was taken from the centre of the road. Is probably taken 20 to 50 metres away. Obviously, it's difficult to quantify distances based on a photo, but you can quite clearly see the road going on to Wessex Waters, and you can see the track leading towards the bakeries. So basically where the pedestrian visibility displays are taken from, the pedestrians will only be set back 1.5 metres, and I think you can quite clearly see 1.5 metres back into that track. So vehicles will be able to see pedestrians, although I think they're infrequent. But I think most importantly, in this sense, particularly on his green statement of common ground, I think the noise of those vehicles and the slow speed, I think pedestrians will be very aware that they are coming. So it's been subject to a safety audit. As I said, it's not subject to any safety issues, subject to the resurfacing that we've advised will be carried out, which obviously helps with the dust. But there's no highway safety issues there.
All right. I mean, there is well, I won't go into it. I mean, you say, you know, we'll sort it out on the site visit about what the visibility display actually shows or not. But you've just referenced the surfacing of the track.
Yes.
Do you, and this may be unfair, but having got this document, this shows, and the plan is shown as project code SK01, title deeds for track to east of Westwood Close.
Is this in the title document?
Maybe your council can assist on the actual document when it was provided. I've got an email of it. You probably won't have it.
I think I do.
I mean, it concerns the surfacing of the track, if that helps you.
Yes. If you can ask your point, and I'll try and answer it.
Okay, thank you. So the bit of surfaced footpath on here, new footpath cycleway width, and it shows up to a line that is equal to the boundary with Mrs. Edgar's fence and going slightly diagonal across, running sort of north-south. But the remaining bit of track is going to be left unsurfaced for reasons that aren't particularly clear, other than the fact that they seem to belong to different people.
No, I think it's abundantly clear that when the Highway Authority asked us to consider the connection, it was to provide an access point from the site to basically the first, basically where the adopted highway cul-de-sac is, and to discharge pedestrians onto that section. So we're only surfacing the bit of the track where we're directing pedestrians to use.
Yeah, so the bit that the pedestrians will use is they will step, and maybe, I mean, but the most relevant photo, and if you've still got the document open, is photo 5 of Mrs. Edgar's evidence.
Yeah, I'll just bring that up again. I'm sort of jumping around between documents, so it's quite a few.
Appreciate it is difficult. I have struggled myself.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes. So if you're looking at photo 5, and again, just to set the scene, it is showing a view slightly closer to the edge of the fencing than the previous one.
Yes.
You can't actually see the more southerly fence post, but that's beside the point. That section, as you were to step out from the new pathway, would be onto unmade road. Yes, unmade track.
where we're providing the pedestrian connection.
Yes, so where the pedestrian connection comes out, it would be onto that unmade bit of track.
It would, and I think as part of the safety audit, and I think also as part of the consultation responses by the Highway Authority, is that as part of the detailed design of the scheme, we would surface that.
Right.
That is, so basically all the element of that track proposed to be used will be surfaced in an appropriately bound material to the Highway Authority's adopted sort of satisfaction. So it's going to be proposed as a public right of way. It will be maintained and adopted by the Highway Authority. So anything we put in will need to be done to that specification. And it's something the safety audit advised we should do, and which we've agreed to do. And
that's very admirable, but and this may be, unfortunately, where your lack of this document shows, but the inspector has it. On this latest version, there is a red sort of, say, rectangle, and it says remaining lane to be left as in existing condition, which would be unsurfaced. So it would seem that the person granting that right of way, there would appear to be problems with actually surfacing it, whether it's covenants or anything else, but they are proposing it's left unsurfaced, and you're saying that that wouldn't be in the guidance that you had come to with the council. Is that correct?
No, basically the appeal have been, I think it dealt with by Mr. Marsham's evidence, but we have all that land under our control to be able to design a scheme as part of the detailed design to the satisfaction of the Highway Authority, and that's a part of the agreed condition. I think the plan originally kept it as unsurfaced, but there's been requested that we do surface it. We've agreed to that, and that could be covered by an appropriately worded condition.
Okay, so you're just this will be my last point. You are saying that for the safety of future users, that bit of track would have to be surfaced as well to provide a safe and secure footing, if you like, for people to use. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's an issue that was brought up in the safety audit, and it's an issue that we've agreed that we would look to address, and in agreement with the Highway Authority, it's agreed that we'll do it as part of the detailed design of the scheme.
So that's all part of the conditions. Okay, that's fine. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you for bearing with me.
Thank you, Mr. Storer. I've no questions for you, Mr. Jones. You've covered all the things I wanted you to. Any questions by way of re-examination, Mr. Boyle? No? Okay. Well, that brings us almost very neatly to lunchtime. Thank you, Mr. Jones. You're now free.
Thanks.
It is very nearly midday. Is everybody content for a break running to 10 to 1 for lunch? That's just over 50 minutes. Is that enough? Yeah, not getting any looks of horror. We'll do that then. We'll adjourn now and resume at 10 to 5 when we'll hear from the last witness, Mr. Marsh. Thank you. We're adjourned.